My initial plan was to tell a history of Algeria and fit it into a 10-minute video. My thinking was that this was the best way I could make a video while accommodating my very busy schedule of telling myself law school is worth it. But I realized very quickly that Algeria's history is so rich that that would be impossible. So instead, I'm telling this story of how France and its settlers killed thousands of Algerians, laying the kindling for an even bloodier revolution to follow. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, Atlas VPN. Do you make controversial videos on the internet? Me personally, I would never. But if you do, I have the VPN for you. With more than 6 million users worldwide, Atlas VPN works to make the internet more secure and accessible to everyone. This is the best VPN deal in the market. Enjoy the most affordable online protection for just $1.83 per month, plus 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Grab this big deal now. Unlock your favorite content from all over the world. Can't access Friends or other legendary shows on your Netflix while being abroad? That's not a problem anymore. Atlas VPN has got you covered. Keep Google searches in private. Looking for something on Google that you don't want someone to know about? Me too sometimes. That's where Atlas VPN has got you. Please make sure to consider this great deal. Now on to the video. On May 8th, 1945, the world was celebrating the fall of the Nazi regime. Europe was liberated, but her colonies were not, and this tension would soon manifest into severe violence in Algeria. See, Algeria at this point in time was a colony of France. It became a colony after the French consul to Algeria refused to repay Algeria a debt. The Bey hit him in the face with a fly swatter, and France used this as an opportunity to take over Algeria. A very normal response. After Algeria was conquered, the French sent settlers to Algeria. In 1830, there were a few hundred Europeans in Algeria, and by 1954, there were nearly 1 million. For the sake of these settlers, France expropriated land from Algerians. By World War I, the French took 11.6 million hectares of farmland from Algerian peasants. In one village, Algerians lost 2/3 of their land to a French settlement. This forced people, who were peasant farmers, into being wage laborers for European settlers at an intense pay gap between Europeans and Algerians. The French made Algeria a part of France proper, but Algerians were not a part of France. The European settlers had French citizenship, but the Algerians did not. In the village of Tizi Ouzou, what this looked like was 236 settlers being given the decision-making power over 22,000 of the indigenous people's tax dollars. So, Algerians responded to this oppression in a number of ways, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be focusing on 2 of them. The first were those who wanted to reform the system and reconcile being Algerian and French. They wanted Algerians to have equal rights with Europeans, but did not ask that Algeria become an independent country. Derisively, these people were called the Young Algerians, in reference to the Young Turks, because they were both seen as adopting a Europeanized lifestyle and carried on their shoulders the very pure-hearted and not at all facetious civilizing mission of the French. But they were doing it unironically. One of the most prominent figures from this movement would be Farhat Abbas, who, in this early phase of his political life, wrote an essay titled, "I Am France." That's embarrassing. The other response was calling for revolution and independence. One of the principal proponents of this was Ahmed Mesli, better known as Masali Hajj. After his original organization was banned, he helped form the People's Party of Algeria. It was a communist party, though concerning communism, Masali once said that he did not, quote, always really understand what its ideology was, unquote. But he knew one thing for sure: France sucked. He wanted Algeria to be an independent country, land to be redistributed from colonizers and feudalists, and for peasants and workers to have better social benefits. By 1937, he proved to be fairly popular, and organized a 25,000-strong rally on Bastille Day, with people calling for land for the peasants and independence. France listened to the cries of the people yearning for freedom by arresting Messali. Now, while Messali was captured by France, France was captured by Germany, and now a Vichy tribunal sentenced Messali to 16 years of hard labor, and then banished him from Algeria for 20 years. This made him a martyr to the cause of Algerian independence. At the same time, Farhat Abbas began to push for more radical changes. Inspired by the Allies and their calls for self-determination, in 1943 he published the Manifesto of the Algerian People, which condemned colonialism and called for Algerian self-determination. France too began to respond to these calls for equality. Their proposal on its face gave Algerians representation, but it did not give them equality. It split the representation on a sectarian basis between settlers and the indigenous, and disproportionately allocated the settlers' seats. Algerians who had 8 times the population of the Europeans were given the same number of seats. I don't know why, but France really had a thing for imposing sectarian governments on the people that they colonized. See Lebanon. Algerians were not interested in modest reforms that still ensured the supremacy of Europeans. So, 1945 comes around, and World War II was ending. And by this point in time, Messali was out of captivity and was in Algeria again when in April the French picked him up and deported him to Brazzaville in the Congo. This caused many of his supporters to be pretty upset. And finally, May 8th, Victory in Europe Day, 1945, drops, and everyone is celebrating those who had sacrificed their lives to free France. Thousands of Algerians sacrificed their lives fighting to free France, and many took this opportunity to honor their own contribution to the war effort and to call for a free Algeria. Messali's supporters also came out demanding his release. In the market town of Setif, they waved a precursor to what would become the Algerian flag. It's cool on its own right, but the current one is clearly much cooler, in my opinion. The French, however, did not like this flag at all, and the police were ordered to take away the flags. This caused a scuffle in which the police fired upon the marchers. This in turn caused a panic to spread across the country, and in the town of Guelma as well, people began rioting and attacking Europeans. The French escalated even further and began an onslaught against the Algerians, which included indiscriminately bombing villages and a tactic called raking over. World War II Douglas bombers dropped explosives over several villages, and the coastal town of Karata was bombarded by a battle cruiser. Settlers formed paramilitary groups that joined in on the attacks against Algerians as well, and by the end of it, 102 Europeans were killed, while Algerians were numbered in the thousands. The number of Algerians killed here is numbered somewhere between 6,000 and 45,000 people. Regardless, thousands paid in their lives and blood for this event to occur, and it struck a chord in the hearts of Algerians, many of whom cited this as the incident that inspired them to take up arms for liberation. Meanwhile, Farhat Abbas condemned the violence against Europeans, which the French took as a very heartfelt message of peace, love, and understanding, and allowed him to stay in their fanciest hotel, Le Jail. He was arrested for 11 months with no charge. So cool. While this event definitely hardened the resolve of Algerians to fight for their liberation of their country, and would serve as what arguably would be called the beginning of the Algerian War for Independence, they as yet did not have a leadership that was structurally sound enough to launch a revolution. To illustrate this point, let's look at the PPA. The PPA started as a group backed by the French Communist Party called the Étoile Nord Africaine, or the North African Star, which would collapse and be reformed after repression from the French into the People's Party of Algeria, another communist party that were hated on by the French Communist Party. The PPA had a militant wing called the OS, or the Special Organization, real original name I know, which would soon collapse. It was reformed as the Revolutionary Committee for Unity and Action, which also collapsed. But veterans of these groups would eventually form the National Liberation Front, or the FLN, and in 1954, the revolution could finally begin. And wow, I'm getting really close into the Algerian Revolution, which is not something that this video can really cover. But I hope this video has, at the very least, made you excited to learn more about the history of Algeria and its revolution, and more knowledgeable about its causes and France's atrocities in general. Once again, big thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video, and shout out to the great deal they are offering. Next, I want to remind you to subscribe, comment, like, and share the video if you enjoyed it. And lastly, I want to thank the patrons, the real MVPs who make these videos easier for me to make. If you want to be thanked at the end of every video, please consider becoming a $7 and up patron. Without Jesus Christ. Anyway, without further ado, thank you to Avocado Kirby, Rod B, Just N Speaks, Misaki, Pyrotic Napalm, Ravignon, Alex Ryanhard, and Doubly Triple. Thank you all for watching. Yes, I'm keeping that mistake in. Have a good day.